evening, and welcome to Africa's Vision Network. Africa's Vision Network features African cultural awareness, education, economic empowerment, religion, spirituality, and other issues facing the African world. I am Princess Ayo, your host. Our program will focus on a very important person in my life. My mother is here. Everyone that has watched me for 12 years, here she is, the leader of the pack. My mother is Minister Lillian Durodola. Lillian Isabel Winbush Durodola was born September 21st, 1924 in Newark, New Jersey. She will celebrate her 86th birthday next month. She is still energized, enthusiastic, and working in the community and in the church. And as you can see, gorgeous. Yeah, baby. In 2008, she was ordained as a minister of the gospel at Second Baptist Church, Southeast Washington, D.C. Even after the passing to glory of my dad and her husband, Dr. James I. Durodola, last year, July 2nd, 2009, she continues to lead the Bible study that they led together at Lake Ann Fellowship House in Reston, Virginia, where she and Dad resided for 14 years. Mother attended Barringer High School, Newark, New Jersey. She is a graduate of Providence Barrington Bible College of Providence, Rhode Island, and the Kennedy School of Missions, Hartford Seminary Foundation, Hartford, Connecticut. Welcome to Africa's Vision Network.
Well, thank you.
It's been so long I've been doing this show, Mother, and it's the first time you've been here. But like I was saying, you're like the third member of the family to come on. When we need a guest, just grab family members.
It's a good thing you have a fairly big family.
Yes, we'll be rolling on and on. But we're so glad to have you. And we, over the years in America, I've found that people find our lives so intriguing,
yes,
amazing.
They do.
And our producer, of course, agrees with everybody else. So she says, your mother must come on and talk about our life in Nigeria and the way things were. And, Mother, we all talk, we talk all the time, and we have fun as a family. But before we start the show, we're going to talk about Dad, and we're going to talk about Nigeria. What thought do you have right now that you would like to say before we start about what we're going to talk about?
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I've been hearing about the show for a long time. Unfortunately, I can't see it where I live, but I've kept abreast of what you folks have been doing, and I think it's just great.
Well, thank you so much. I, as an African storyteller, get to talk to African Americans and Americans a lot, when I'm speaking. And there's always this question, and it's just an interesting one for me. And I know I put it in here, like in the script, like an ad lib, but it is interesting. And I think our guests would like to know, because in our community, there are so many different races. And I meet a lot of young women who are dating African men, or about to marry a Nigerian man, and they're so excited, and they're going to go to Nigeria and live with him. And, I try not to go, but, just an advice or a thought for one of these young women out here, black, white, or Oriental, wherever they're from, who is going to marry an African. What kind of advice? You married Dad, a Nigerian, and you had this long marriage with him, and you went to Nigeria and you stayed there, and you put up with whatever had to be just to be there. So what advice would you, just a short comment to them?
That's a bit difficult because Africa is a big country. I mean, a big continent, excuse me. Right. I was thinking so much about the fact that so many people in the United States think Africa is a country. Right. But it's full of many countries, and the cultures are very different. Even within Nigeria, the cultures from one part of Nigeria to another is very difficult. And the people, of course, in each area of Nigeria are very different. They speak a different language, a different mother tongue from any of the others. I believe there's over 200 languages in Nigeria, and I'm not talking about dialects, but languages. And so the cultures from one place to another are very different. But I would suggest that person find out as much about the area they'll be going to as possible before they go.
Okay.
You go to your library, find out as much as you can about the people, about the history of the people, I read up on as much as I possibly could about Yorubas because my husband was of the Yoruba tribe. And so I felt I was pretty well equipped by the time I got there. Yes. But nothing prepares you for what awaits you in Nigeria. You can just do the best you can to find out as much as possible, and I certainly would hope that would happen, but to actually be there is quite another thing.
Right. I remember you preparing us when I was 7 and we were about to go, and the picture that stands out in my mind is the picture of the little girl taking her shower in the rain, and I couldn't wait to get there to be allowed to be stark naked outside in the rain. I don't think I ever got a chance to do that.
I don't think you ever did.
That was my dream. But
yeah,
you know that you did do that, a lot of preparation. Well, I remember.
What can I just say? We were driving from Lagos to Ibadan, where my husband was going to be consultant at a University College Hospital there. And I didn't know what you thought, and I was anxious to know what you thought. We were in a different climate altogether. The houses were built so differently, and I said to you, a 7-year-old, "Oh, what do you think, Carol? You know, what we're driving down this road, what do you think about Nigeria?" And you said, "Well, I think that if you gave Americans a bunch of straw and bricks and told them make a house, they wouldn't be able to do it, but these people can."
Now, I knew this was going to happen on the show. I've never heard that story before. All my life, okay?
And I was so surprised that you had that attitude, you know, that you could already see how amazing these people were.
Wow. Wow. I didn't know that. Now, as a wife there for the first time in Nigeria, I remember there was a club that you belonged to, and it was called
Niger Wives.
Because in Nigeria, when we call ourselves Nigerians, but when we're like, a nickname for our own selves is Niger. So it was called Niger Wives. And I went a couple of times, and then I didn't really become a Niger wife because I was half Nigerian, but I married a Nigerian, and then I started going to the meetings.
That's all you would need to be a Niger wife, just be married to a Nigerian.
Club. So, you know, there were women from all other countries. You know, tell us about the club.
Well, they really came from all over. When Nigerian men go abroad for further education, they're a marriageable age. And so it's only normal that they would seek out somebody to share their lives.
Right.
And this group got together to just give each other some support.
Okay.
Because life there is very, very different. Problems that you would have here are unknown in Nigeria and vice versa. And it was really more of a social club.
Okay.
But we found out that many of us were Christians. So, and the others who weren't didn't mind us talking about God. So a Bible study grew out of Niger Wives.
I didn't know that either. What were some of the problems that you all tackled or helped each other with?
Well, I think the main thing was the difference in our husbands. I found out that many Niger wives had an experience that I did not have with my husband. That as soon as their husbands had been in this country for years and years and years, but somehow when they set their feet on Nigerian soil, they somehow became a different person altogether. Okay. A man that they hardly knew. A man that would hold their hands and look into their eyes, no matter who was around, would never do that again. Right. Because it's not the custom there to show your affection for your wife.
Right. In those days.
Right. Things have changed a great deal, but in those days, that's the way it was.
Wow. I remember one problem, not a problem they solved, but I remember when I got married, big hoopla, and then I had my first child, Ricky, big hoopla because I was still in college, and I remember saying I wasn't going to be able to finish because I want to take care of my baby. And and it was okay. I had support, but I didn't want to leave him. I wanted to stare at him all day.
Yeah, a lot of American wives feel the same
right,
way.
And I remember one of the Niger wives came to see me, and I think she had said something to you like, she's not allowed to stop going to college. We're not going to allow her to stop going to college. If we have to kick her, she's going to keep going to college. And I remember her coming to see me and saying, you're not leaving college, you know. And so that was one of them. I don't know if Connie Adeyeri was one of them.
It sounds like Connie.
Because she also came, and another problem was to go to school and finish that thesis and take care of Ricky and feed him. And, you know, he was a ferocious eater. And she came, and I remember her coming into the kitchen and cutting the nipple off the baby bottle and pouring the cereal in it and putting it in his mouth and said, no spoon, let him gobble it down and you study. So, yes, they were
very supportive.
Yeah, they were something else. And now we're going to go back to before you went to Nigeria, where you're a young wife with me, and Daddy's going to medical school. And you went to Germany. So tell us.
That's where he went. His first year of medical school was at Bellevue in New York.
Okay.
And then, of course, he was totally unscholarshiped by his government or anybody else. So how was he going to support a medical school? And he had a wonderful professor that suggested that he go to Germany, because at that time, I don't know whether they still do it now, if you went to medical school in Germany, the government paid for your education. You didn't have to be German to have it, but they paid for all of your education as long as you were going to be a doctor.
Okay. So that's cool. So then you got to
go. He transferred to Frankfurt.
Yes.
The University of Frankfurt.
Yes.
And I had to keep working because I was the only one working.
Yes.
So I stayed here in the United States. But before he was finished, I did have a chance to go over for 5 months and visit. And you were 2 years old when we went.
Yes.
And when we went to Germany to see him, and you hadn't seen him for a long time. And I didn't even know if you would remember him. Although he did come back in the summertime to work here and then go back to Germany when school. But and when he took you in his arms, you kind of pushed his shoulders back so you could get a good look at him, you know. And you looked and looked and looked, and then you put your head down on his shoulder. And I thought, okay, we're fine. She does know who he is.
I'm related to you.
Yes.
and that time in my life was the first time I remember anything. And I remember telling you, and you were like, you couldn't remember that. You were 2. But I do, my first memory in my life is walking through this orchard that seemed like an orchard. The trees met at the top. And it seemed like a white man, but you're telling me that was the 16-year-old son of the pastor who we were staying with. And I was holding this white man's hand and walking with him and just feeling so wonderful as I walked through this forest, it seemed to me.
Well, if you could remember that, I don't doubt it at all, because you started talking when you were 8 months old, and I'd never seen anything. I mean, and you started talking in a sentence, and I'd never seen that before.
Hence, I'm here.
Still talking. Still talking.
Yes, amazing. Yeah, amazing. Now, our producer heard you tell some fabulous stories recently, and you know what a great storyteller you are. And one of them was where someone asked what our mother tongue was. Okay, so
it was the census. Nigeria had a census, and they came to our house, and they were getting information about our family, and I was giving it to them. And finally, he said, "What is your children's mother tongue?" And I said, "English." He said, no, madam, it can't be English, because you are here in this Nigeria. It has to be one of our languages. What is these children, their mother tongue? I said, well, now, if you want to say father tongue, then that's something different, because they're here in his country. But their mother tongue is English, because I'm their mother. And I don't know how to even speak your language yet. He says, well, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. There's nothing on this sheet about it. He said, well, I'll put down Yoruba. I said, well, you can put Yoruba if you like, but that's not their mother tongue, and they still don't speak Yoruba.
Oh, goodness.
But you did speak Yoruba by the time you got to high school.
Right. So with a lot of cultural differences that you can't even really explain to someone unless they're they're there. You know, I remember, and it stands out in my mind because it makes me proud of both countries that I feel I belong to, that every time you filled out forms for us, and I remember it was probably staff school, and I remember looking over your shoulder, and you would always fill it out Nigerian American. And I thought that was quite amazing.
Yeah, I declared you were Nigerian American, but
now,
you were all born here.
But now in
except
America,
the last
they're doing
child.
the same thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
except the last child.
Yeah. And the world has become that where we can be proud to be Korean and American, Chinese and American. Yeah, so that's great.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's and makes me proud and makes me not feel like I'm more one side than the other.
Because you're both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people say, how do you correlate the two? I said, but I feel very much a part of both. I feel very much an American.
Yeah.
I feel very much a Nigerian. Yeah. So it's great. Another thing that she heard you talk about was you went to apply for a driver's license.
Yeah. Yes, that was the first year I was there. I had an American driver's license, and I was told all I needed to do was exchange it for a Nigerian one, and I would have a Nigerian driver's license. I wouldn't have to take a test or drive or anything. I just had to show that I could drive in my country. And so when I got there was a long line of people, and I finally got, in fact, it stretched outside the door, and so I stood at the end of the line. And eventually I managed to get inside the door. And I had a book with me because I expected to have to wait a long time. So I was reading my book. And in about 5 minutes I heard somebody say, "Madame, come forward. It is your turn." So I thought to myself, how could they have dealt with all those people that fast? There wasn't anybody in the room. So I went forward and got my license. And when I came out, I realized what had happened. They had made all those Nigerians leave the room while I got my license. Remember, this was in 1963.
Okay.
And it hadn't been very long since Nigeria declared independence. Okay. And I think many of them still had the mentality that to be a white person, which they called me, was, you know, they should be treated very differently with a great deal of respect. It's no longer like that.
Right.
But in 1963, just after independence, you can't just change people's mindsets overnight. Sure. And I got preferential treatment.
Wow.
Which I didn't really enjoy. It really bothered me that they had made these people who had been waiting all this time go outside and to give me that preferential treatment.
Right. I remember you being irritated with them giving preferential treatment. And it seemed to me you came as the Martin Luther King to that area, and it was Mother is on. We were like, oh, Mother's preaching again, Lord. Somebody must have cheated somebody. Somebody must have let somebody go through because they thought they would, color their skin. And she is like, listen, we're over there suffering, and I know you better not be letting him get in front. I'd be like, oh boy, here we go. But it was great because when I got to the age of being able to see it, I remember being in high school and I had something wrong with my finger. No, Rosemary had something wrong with her finger. She had Whitlow. And we went to UCH, and when we got there, the emergency room, there was really a guy who had his neck cut. It almost looked like it was like a gory movie. And there were two of them, and they had their necks slashed, and they were trying to get them in. And the head nurse looked over the crowd and saw Rose and I sitting there. And, Durodola! Look at the Durodola children. Come here. And they were pushing the guy. Let him sit in there. Children, come. I'm like,
because Daddy was on staff.
Daddy's staff. And I felt so annoyed. I'm like, we can wait. It's her finger. But these guys really are bleeding.
Yes.
And so I remember that. But you had taught us and made us so indignant about that that we had the sense to feel indignant about it.
That was good.
Yeah.
I'm glad it paid off.
Yes, it did. Yes, it did. Now, talking about us in our education and bringing us up over there, we had to go to school there, and staff school. I think. What did you think about the education? Was it comparable, better?
I thought it was excellent. I thought it was excellent. You children had a lot to adjust to, and the thing that you needed adjustment to was simply the accent, the accent that non-English speaking people used there that you didn't quite understand.
Yes, that you hear us constantly going back and forth in during this interview.
I don't even think about it.
I know. But what did it feel like? Because this is more the staff school was like one thing, and then boarding school. I mean, high school. She shivers at the thought of it.
Carol, of course, was the oldest, and so she was the first one to go away to school. And I'm in my American mindset, I'm ready for my child to go away to school when they're 18, but not when they're 11. You know, I just couldn't wrap my mind around the fact that every child, at least those that lived at the University of Ibadan, where we lived, they all go to boarding school.
Right.
And of course, I cried the first week. I would wait till my husband went to sleep, and I'd bury my head in the pillow and cry. So much so that when I went to see you, one of the vice principals said to you, Carol, as soon as you feel better, let your mother know, because she's really suffering.
And of course I was fine, but I didn't think I was fine.
No.
Because I cried for 3 years. I wanted to be home. I want to go to my mommy. And of course I got teased, you know.
Yeah.
How can you be this big? You whole 12-year-old, you're crying for your mommy. And I'm like, that made me cry more. They're being mean to me, you know, and the food was different and everything.
Yes, the food.
Yeah.
And the bathroom facilities.
Yes.
All of this was very
We
different.
went to the bathroom in buckets. Yes. And some of you are still doing that, so don't laugh. But it was when I look back, and I think it's the third year, I wrote a letter to Daddy to say thank you for making me stay.
Yes.
Because then I knew how to eat the peppery food, and then I knew how to cook some of it, the eba, the gari, and I knew how to speak a lot of the language. And I was now a senior. Once you're a senior, you know, third year, well, you can boss other people around.
Yeah.
You know? And then I had little ones I could help who were also half another country or grew up in another country, even though they were Nigerians, and so I sort of had my job, my ministry,
mentoring,
yes, of helping you to stay and not cry the rest of the 3 years like I did. You know? So it was great. But what did you think about the educational system for the high school now?
It was great. It was great. In those days, in the early days, there was still a lot of expatriate teachers around. In fact, the high school you went to had an English principal and vice principal, and she put on some theatrical performances that I have yet to see matched in a high school here in this country. Yeah, so it wasn't just books all the time, although books were very important, but also Shakespeare was important, and all of those things that you don't think about an African child knowing about. They were right there.
Yes. Well, you won't believe this, but we got 2 minutes.
I figured we were getting pretty long.
Too much fun is fooling around. Gloria's like, please, but you know what? What can we do? It's been great.
Yeah, you better close pretty soon.
Well, you know, now that you came back to America, that was quite a trip for you. I'm sure you left Daddy behind, I know, and stayed here for a while.
Well, yeah,
How was it coming back home after? We're all grown now.
Yeah.
Grandkids.
But you see, Daddy didn't just, it wasn't just that I was separated from Daddy, because he came to the United States whenever it got
really bad over there.
Got to be summer over here.
Okay.
So it was like he still had work to do in his lab. He hadn't totally retired, and so he would go back and forth to take care of work there. And he was an oncologist, and he was doing research on Nigerian plant extracts, and so he went back and forth quite often. So it wasn't like...
It was a commute.
It was a commute.
Across the ocean.
Yes.
But that's cool. But so coming back here and hanging out with us, your daughters and your son,
my
and
grown-up children,
and your grandchildren.
Yeah, it was very different, of course. And I tried to respect that difference.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember one comment you made. You said, we were saying, how are you doing, Mother, being back in America? And you said, it's so boring here. It's the same president every day, and it's the same money, and you know, no coups, you know. But Mother, I'm so glad you came.
Well, thank you.
It was fun having you. And I know what they're going to say. Can she come back? So we'll talk. But anyway, good evening, everyone. Thank you for watching our show. And stay tuned when we have another great show on Africa's Vision Network. Did